Donald Trump was a person who did things that made a lot of people argue. One thing people always talked about was how much money he had. He always said he became super rich by himself, starting with $1 million from his dad. But if we look closer, we can see that his dad actually helped him a lot. In this video, we're gonna look behind Trump's billions, to see how he really got his real estate empire. To know how Donald Trump got rich, we need to learn about his dad's success. When Fred Trump was young, his father died, so he had to find a way to take care of himself. He started building houses when he was only 20 years old, and people really liked them and wanted to buy them. Fred Trump became very rich because of some special programs the government had. The president at that time, President Roosevelt, wanted to build more houses, so he made some rules and gave money to people who wanted to build houses. Fred used those rules and money to build lots of houses. This happened during the 1930s and even during World War II, when the government helped build houses for soldiers. After the war, lots of people wanted houses, so the government helped even more by making it easier for people to buy houses with a special law called the GI Bill. All of these things helped Fred Trump make a lot of money. But giving the land for rent wasn't the only thing Fred Trump did to make his kids rich. For the next 20 years, he did something else. First, he made companies that didn't do anything. Then, he got land and built apartments using money from the government. After that, he gave the ownership of these companies to his kids. He only paid taxes for 1 out of the 8 buildings he gave to his children. Let me tell you a story about something Fred Trump did. In 1968, he built something worth a lot of money, $2.5 million. Then, a year later, he gave a little bit of it, 15%, to each of his kids as a gift. When you give a gift, you usually have to pay some money called gift tax. For this gift, Fred was supposed to pay almost $100,000, but he only paid $6,500. After finishing college in 1968, Donald Trump started working with his dad in their business. This meant that he was becoming more involved in their money transfer. In 1972, they made a special team to get a big loan, $8 million, to build a tall building called Prospects Tower. By 1975, he was getting more than $300,000 every year just from that building. And if we count all the other money he got, he had already received $9 million from his dad when he was only 29 years old. Let me tell you about something else that happened with Donald Trump and his dad. When Donald started a big project in Manhattan called the Grand Hyatt, he got even more loans and did some tricky things with money. Then, he built another big building called Trump Tower. During this time, his dad did some special plans with trusts. He got loans for many properties, about 14 of them, and then he gave them to trusts that helped Donald and his brothers and sisters. Towards the end of the 1980s, a lot of money, almost $50 million, was given to Donald in different ways. But instead of being satisfied, he wanted to take even bigger risks. In 1988, he bought the Plaza Hotel for over $400 million, and the next year, he got Eastern Airlines for over $350 million. He changed its name to Trump Shuttle. It's important to mention that when Donald's casinos in Atlantic City had money problems in the early 1990s, his dad Fred Trump helped him out. Let me explain something else that happened with Fred Trump. He made a lot of money during this time, about $50 million. But here's the interesting part, he had to pay $12 million in taxes. What's strange is that he didn't use much of that money to pay his debts or give it to charity. Fred was very careful with his money and didn't like to pay taxes if he could avoid it. Something else happened too. One of Fred's workers went to the Trump Castle Casino and bought a lot of casino chips, worth almost $3.5 million, but didn't use them to play any games. Another thing Fred did was buy a part of Donald's buildings and then sell it back to him for less money. In 1987, he bought a piece of a big building in Manhattan called Trump Palace for over $15 million. But just 4 years later, he sold it back to Donald for only $10,000, saying that the business was doing badly, even though it wasn't. In that same year, Trump Palace sold 57 apartments for more than $50 million in total. Around the early 1990s, Fred got sick and started forgetting things. He wanted to give his money to his children before he died, so he came up with a clever plan. His children made a company that took care of all his buildings. They charged a lot of money for repairs and improvements, making Fred's empire spend a lot more. For example, the price of taking away the trash increased by 64%, the cost of cleaning supplies doubled, and the price of plumbing went up by 120%. In 1994, Fred's children also became the bosses of his buildings to take even more money from his empire. In the late 1990s, Fred figured out a way to give each of his children a lot of money every year. When it was time to transfer the buildings to his children, they wanted to make sure the buildings were valued at a low price. So they hired a person who was known for appraising real estate to help them. This person used different tricks to make the buildings seem less valuable. For example, he said that 2 of the buildings were worth less than nothing. You see, in 1992 Fred took those 2 buildings out of a program that made the rent cheaper for people, but in doing so, he lost a tax break. In the end, Fred only had to pay $20 million to transfer all of his buildings to his children. When Fred passed away in 1999, he had only $2 million in the bank. But his children got all the properties he had worked hard to collect over many years. In early 2004, they sold the whole collection of properties their father had gathered to a rich person in New York City for $700 million. Donald has continued to do business since then, and now he's estimated to be worth around $3 billion. So he did accomplish a lot on his own, even though his father gave him a big head start. As for whether Fred's ways of avoiding taxes were legal or not, even if they were wrong, too much time has passed to punish Donald. He might have to pay some fines, though. By the way, many wealthy people in New York City find ways to avoid paying lots of taxes, so they end up paying very little, sometimes as little as 0.017% of what they should. Hope you have liked the video. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share our channel for more exciting content. Thank you for watching.